I'm a veterinarian. A dog's X-ray revealed something that solved a missing person case. The X-ray image appeared on my monitor at 4:15 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and what I saw made me stop mid-sentence in the middle of explaining heartworm prevention to the dog's owner. The German Shepherd on my exam table was named Atlas, a beautiful 3-year-old with intelligent eyes and a slight limp that his owner had brought him in to investigate. I'd been expecting to find maybe a torn ligament, possibly arthritis, perhaps a small fracture. What I found instead was a human finger bone lodged in his digestive tract. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm 36 years old, and I've been a licensed veterinarian for 11 years. I run a small animal practice in rural Oregon, about 40 miles outside of Portland, in a town called Millbrook, where everyone knows everyone, and the most exciting thing that usually happens is the annual Harvest Festival. My typical day involves routine vaccinations, dental cleanings, the occasional emergency surgery for a dog who ate something they shouldn't have. I've removed socks, toys, rocks, corn cobs, and once an entire tennis ball from various pets' stomachs. But I'd never seen anything like this. Atlas belonged to a man named Robert Griffin, a quiet guy in his 50s who lived alone on a property bordering the national forest. He'd brought Atlas in because the dog had been limping for about a week and seemed to be in discomfort. Standard orthopedic case, or so I thought. I'd sedated Atlas lightly to get clear X-rays of his legs and hips, checking for joint problems or bone abnormalities. The limping issue turned out to be minor, a small stone bruise on his paw pad. But while reviewing the full-body images, making sure I hadn't missed anything, I noticed an unusual density in his stomach area. I zoomed in, enhanced the image, and felt my mouth go dry. It was unmistakably a human phalanx, a finger bone, with the distinctive shape of the distal phalanx, the bone at the very tip of a finger, complete with what appeared to be remnants of a fingernail still attached. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my mind racing through possible explanations. Medical waste that Atlas had gotten into somehow? But that seemed unlikely in rural Oregon, miles from any hospital. An archaeological find, maybe an old burial site that Atlas had dug up? But the bone looked too clean, too recent, not the darkened, degraded appearance of something ancient. And then there was the fact that Atlas had swallowed it. Dogs will eat a lot of things, but they don't typically consume random bones they find unless they're fresh, unless they smell like food, unless they're associated with something the dog perceived as prey. "Mr. Griffin," I said carefully, keeping my voice professionally neutral. When we were doing the full-body X-rays, I noticed something unusual in Atlas's stomach. Can you tell me about his eating habits? Has he been getting into anything unusual lately? Garbage, compost, anything he might have scavenged? Robert looked confused. No, nothing like that. He's pretty good about not eating random stuff. Why? What did you find? I need to ask you some specific questions, and I need you to answer honestly, I said. Has Atlas been roaming your property unsupervised? Has he had access to the forest area behind your house? Robert nodded. Yeah, I let him out to run. He stays pretty close. Maybe ranges a quarter mile or so into the trees. He's good about coming when I call. Why? Is he sick? Did he eat something poisonous? I pulled up the X-ray image and rotated the monitor so Robert could see it. I pointed to the object in Atlas's stomach. Mr. Griffin, what I found is concerning. This appears to be a human bone, specifically a finger bone, and it looks relatively recent. Robert stared at the screen, his face going pale. What? That's impossible. Where would he even find something like that? That's what we need to figure out, I said. Because if this is what I think it is, we need to contact the authorities immediately. This could be evidence in a crime. Robert stood up abruptly, his hands shaking. Are you saying someone's dead? That Atlas found a body? I'm saying we need to call the police and let them make that determination, I said, already reaching for my phone. In the meantime, I need to keep Atlas here. That bone needs to be removed surgically, and it needs to be preserved as potential evidence. I called the Millbrook Police Department, which consisted of exactly 4 officers and a police chief who also served as the town's volunteer fire chief. Chief Tom Morrison answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that small-town casual tone that suggested he was probably dealing with a noise complaint or maybe someone's escaped chickens. Chief Morrison, this is Dr. Chen at the veterinary clinic. I need you to come down here immediately. I found something in a patient x-ray that I believe might be human remains. The casual tone vanished instantly. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't let anyone leave, and don't touch anything. He arrived in 3 minutes, accompanied by Officer Jennifer Walsh, the youngest member of the force and the one who actually had training in forensic procedures. They studied the x-ray while I explained the situation, how Atlas had been roaming the forest property behind Robert's house, how the bone appeared recent rather than ancient. We need to remove this surgically, Chief Morrison said. Can you do that now? And can you preserve it exactly as it is? This is potential evidence in what might be a homicide investigation. I can perform the surgery, I confirmed. I'll document everything photographically and preserve the bone in a sterile container. But Chief, if there's one finger bone, there might be more remains wherever Atlas found this. You need to search his property and the surrounding forest. Robert was sitting in the corner of my exam room, looking like he might be sick. I didn't know, he kept saying. I had no idea. Atlas just runs around out there. He chases squirrels, digs holes. I never thought. Mr. Griffin, Officer Walsh said gently, we're going to need you to show us exactly where Atlas has been roaming. Every place he might have been in the past few weeks. Can you do that? Robert nodded mutely, still in shock. I performed the surgery 90 minutes later, with Officer Walsh observing and photographing every step of the procedure. Atlas was under full anesthesia, his vitals stable, as I made the incision and carefully accessed his stomach. The bone was lodged in the gastric lining, partially digested but still largely intact. I removed it with forceps, placed it directly into a sterile evidence bag that Walsh provided, and completed the surgery. Atlas would be fine. But someone somewhere was definitely not fine. Because dogs don't swallow random human bones. They swallow bones that are part of something they found, something they've been chewing on, something that smells like prey. Hello, before we continue with this incredible story, I have an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without prior notice. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, give me that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, from what city are you watching the video? I love meeting each of the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes a difference. Let's interact. Now, where was I? Right. I just surgically removed a human finger bone from Atlas's stomach, and the police were preparing to search Robert's property. Officer Walsh took the evidence bag and headed to the state crime lab in Portland for analysis. Chief Morrison organized a search party, calling in officers from neighboring towns and requesting assistance from the county sheriff's department. The search began the next morning. I wasn't part of the official search team, but I brought Atlas, who'd recovered remarkably well from surgery, to Robert's property to help narrow down the search area. Dogs have an incredible sense of smell, and if Atlas had found remains once, he might be able to lead us back to the location. Robert's property was 20 acres of mixed forest and meadow, backing up to thousands of acres of national forest. The search teams had brought cadaver dogs, but Atlas knew his territory better than any trained search dog would. With Robert's permission, and under the supervision of the search teams, I walked Atlas through the areas where he typically roamed. It took 4 hours. Atlas led us in meandering paths through the woods, stopping occasionally to sniff interesting spots, completely unaware he was helping solve what might be a murder. Finally, about a quarter-mile from Robert's house, in a dense section of forest where fallen logs created natural barriers and hiding places, Atlas stopped at a shallow depression in the ground. He whined, pawed at the dirt, and looked back at me with an expression that clearly said, "This is the place." The cadaver dogs confirmed it immediately. Their handlers called for the forensic team, and everyone stepped back while professionals carefully began excavating the site. What they found over the next 6 hours was a shallow grave containing the remains of a woman who'd been missing for 3 months. Her name was Jennifer Calloway, age 34, a hiker from Portland who'd disappeared while doing a solo backpacking trip in the National Forest. Her car had been found at a trailhead about 5 miles from where her remains were discovered. The case had been treated as a missing person investigation, with search teams combing the trails and officials assuming she'd gotten lost or injured. They'd never found any trace of her, until Atlas swallowed a piece of evidence. The forensic analysis revealed that Jennifer hadn't died from natural causes or an accident. She'd been murdered, killed by blunt force trauma, and her body had been hidden in a shallow grave covered with leaves and branches. The location was far enough from established trails that casual hikers would never find it, but close enough to Robert's property that Atlas, in his daily wanderings, had eventually stumbled across it. The question became, who killed Jennifer Calloway, and why was her body hidden on the edge of Robert's property? Robert became the immediate suspect, which made sense from an investigative standpoint. The body was found on his property. His dog had discovered it. He lived alone with no alibi for the time of Jennifer's disappearance. Detectives from the state police descended on Millbrook, interviewed Robert for hours, searched his house and property, analyzed his computer and phone records. But nothing connected him to Jennifer. He'd never met her, had no reason to harm her, and had a solid alibi for the weekend she disappeared. He'd been in Seattle visiting his daughter, with credit card receipts, surveillance footage, and multiple witnesses confirming his location. The investigation expanded. Detectives reviewed Jennifer's life, her relationships, her hiking patterns. Discovered she'd been an experienced outdoorswoman who'd hiked the Pacific Northwest extensively, who kept detailed journals of her trips, who posted regularly on hiking forums under the username Trailblazer PDX. And in those forums, they found something interesting. Messages from another user, someone who called himself Forest Guardian, who'd been increasingly aggressive and obsessive in his interactions with Jennifer. He'd criticized her hiking alone, insisted she needed protection on the trails, and eventually sent direct messages that were escalating from concerning to threatening. "I know these trails better than anyone," one message read. "You shouldn't hike alone. Accidents happen to women who don't listen." Jennifer had blocked him, reported him to forum moderators, and continued hiking alone. The forum moderators had banned his account, but couldn't identify him. He'd used a VPN and encrypted email. The tech forensics team spent 2 weeks tracing Forest Guardian's digital footprint, finally found an IP address that had been used before the suspect started masking his location. The address belonged to a property 12 miles from where Jennifer's body was found. The property owner was a man named David Brenner, age 42, a former park ranger who'd been fired 5 years earlier for inappropriate behavior toward female hikers. He lived in an isolated cabin, owned extensive outdoor and hunting equipment, and matched witness descriptions of a man who'd been seen on the trails near where Jennifer had parked her car. When state police executed a search warrant on Brenner's property, they found Jennifer's missing hiking boots, her backpack hidden in his shed, and DNA evidence that confirmed she'd been at his cabin before her death. They also found journals detailing his obsession with protecting female hikers by stalking them, following them on trails, convincing himself he was keeping them safe. When that protection was rejected, when Jennifer had blocked him and reported him, he tracked her down on what was supposed to be a safe solo hike, confronted her, And when she'd refused his help, refused his demands that she accept his presence on the trail, he'd killed her in a rage and hidden her body in the national forest. He'd chosen the location carefully, far from trails, but accessible to someone who knew the area intimately. What he hadn't accounted for was Atlas, a German shepherd who roamed his owner's property and occasionally ventured into the forest, who'd eventually discovered the shallow grave and done what dogs do, investigated the interesting smell, dug around in the dirt, and found a small bone that he'd carried away and eventually swallowed. David Brenner was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital footprints, physical evidence, Jennifer's belongings in his possession, and ultimately his own confession once he realized the case against him was airtight. He claimed he'd loved Jennifer, that he'd been trying to protect her, that her death was an accident after she'd attacked him. The prosecution argued what the evidence clearly showed. Brenner was a stalker and murderer who'd killed Jennifer because she'd rejected his obsessive, unwanted attention. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Jennifer's family attended the trial. Her mother approached me afterward, outside the courthouse, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said, gripping my hands. "We've been searching for 3 months, not knowing if she was alive or dead, not knowing what happened to her. Your dog, that X-ray, it gave us answers. It brought our daughter home. I directed all the credit to Atlas," I told her honestly. "I just saw something unusual on an X-ray and called the police." Atlas is the one who found her, but you noticed. Jennifer's mother insisted. You could have dismissed it as medical waste or some random bone. You took it seriously and made the call that broke the case open. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "This is from Jennifer's hiking journal. I thought you should have it." Later, sitting in my truck outside the courthouse, I unfolded the paper. It was a page from Jennifer's journal, dated a month before her disappearance. Took the most beautiful trail today in the Millbrook area. Saw deer, wild turkeys, and the most gorgeous German shepherd running through the forest like he owned the place. He came up to me, friendly as could be, let me pet him for a minute before bounding off into the trees. Days like this remind me why I love hiking alone. The freedom, the wildlife, the unexpected moments of connection with nature. This is where I'm meant to be. She'd met Atlas a month before she was killed, had petted him, enjoyed a brief moment of connection with a friendly dog in the forest. And ultimately, Atlas had been the one to lead us to her, to give her family the answers and closure they desperately needed. Robert Griffin brought Atlas to my clinic a few weeks after the trial ended, just a follow-up visit, making sure Atlas had fully recovered from the surgery, but also, I suspected, because Robert needed someone to talk to who understood what he'd been through. "I keep thinking about it," Robert said, as I examined Atlas's healed incision site. "My dog found a body, found a murdered woman, and I had no idea. I let him roam out there for weeks, and all that time she was lying there, and I didn't know. You couldn't have known," I told him, "and when the evidence came to light, you cooperated fully. You helped find her. That matters. Atlas saved her family, in a way," Robert said quietly, scratching his dog's ears. "Gave them closure. Caught a killer." He looked at me. "All because you saw something on an X-ray and didn't dismiss it. It's strange how cases get solved sometimes." I agreed. A random X-ray, observant veterinarian, a dog who happened to wander in the wrong place at the right time. None of it seems like it should connect, but it does. The case brought unexpected attention to my practice. News outlets covered the story. Dog's X-ray solves missing person case. I did a few interviews, always making sure to emphasize that Atlas was the real hero, that I'd just been doing my job, looking carefully at diagnostic images the way any veterinarian should. But I also started paying different attention to the X-rays I took, the patterns I saw, the unusual objects I found in pets' digestive tracts. Started asking more questions about where pets had been, what they might have gotten into, whether anything I was seeing might indicate something beyond simple veterinary concern. 3 months after Jennifer's case was resolved, I X-rayed a Labrador who'd been vomiting for several days. Found a piece of metal lodged in his intestines. It turned out to be a fragment of a custom ring, distinctive enough that when I reported it to police, they connected it to a burglary case from 2 weeks earlier. The dog had been at a neighbor's house during the burglary, had apparently grabbed and swallowed a piece of evidence that the burglars had dropped during their escape. That case was smaller, less dramatic, but it reinforced something I'd learned from Atlas. Veterinarians see a unique cross-section of the world through our patients. We see what animals ingest, where they've been, what they've encountered. Sometimes that information is medically relevant, and sometimes it's evidence of crimes we never suspected. I still practice routine veterinary medicine, still give vaccinations, perform dental cleanings, treat infections and injuries. Most X-rays show exactly what you'd expect: normal anatomy, occasional foreign objects that are medical concerns, but not criminal evidence. Most days are predictable and uneventful, but I look at every image more carefully now. Question every unusual finding. Trust my instincts when something seems wrong, even if the explanation isn't immediately obvious. Because one Friday afternoon, I found a human finger bone on a routine X-ray, and that discovery brought closure to a grieving family, caught a murderer, and reminded me that sometimes the most important part of being a veterinarian isn't just treating animals. It's paying attention to what those animals are trying to tell us about the world around them. Atlas made a full recovery, continues to roam Robert's property under slightly more supervision now, and has gone back to chasing squirrels and digging holes in completely innocent locations. He's just a dog, living his best dog life, completely unaware that he helped solve a murder case. Jennifer Calloway's family created a memorial hiking trail in her honor, with benches at scenic viewpoints and safety information posted at trailheads. One bench has a plaque that reads, "In memory of Jennifer Calloway, who loved these trails. Hike safely, hike with friends, and remember that the forest holds both beauty and danger." There's a smaller plaque next to it, one that I didn't know about until Robert sent me a photo. It reads, "With gratitude to Atlas, Dr. Sarah Chen, and all who brought Jennifer home." Sometimes heroes have 4 legs, and the people who listen to what they're trying to tell us. I have that photo framed in my clinic now, hanging above my X-ray viewing station. A reminder that every image I look at could contain more than medical information. That dogs are witnesses to the world in ways we often don't consider. That paying attention, asking questions, and trusting your professional judgment can make the difference between a missing person case that goes cold and a family getting the closure they desperately need. I'm a veterinarian. I found a human finger bone on a dog's X-ray. That discovery solved a 3-month-old missing person case, caught a murderer, and brought a young woman's body home to her family. It wasn't the X-ray I expected to take that Friday afternoon, but it was the most important image I've ever captured in 11 years of veterinary practice. Because sometimes the most critical diagnoses we make aren't about the animals we're treating. They're about the evidence those animals are carrying, the stories they're telling, and the justice they can help deliver when we're paying attention. Atlas is just a dog, but his X-ray changed everything, and I'm just a veterinarian who noticed something unusual and made a phone call. Sometimes that's all it takes to bring someone home.